Hey Student Success, welcome to week 4 of the semester. After this week, we're officially halfway done with our course. So I want to plug, while we're right here at the Start Here section, your Student Services assignment. Again, you need to make sure that you get this submitted by the end of our 8-week session. You go into My Serve State, under Academic Support, Student Success Workshops, and we are really nearing the end of the semester here in terms of availability with workshops, since we're already in mid-November, which is crazy to think about. So you really only have a few options left at this point. A few of you have already submitted, so you want to make sure that you go ahead and get registered if you haven't already and submit those certificate of completions. You do not need to submit your receipt that you signed up, just the actual certificate that you attended the workshop. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get into week 4. So week 4 runs from November 15th until the 21st. So that means when you do your discussion forum this week, you want to make sure that you are submitting by Wednesday, the 17th, and then everything else due Sunday, the 21st. You'll see that you have a discussion forum, an assignment, and another assignment. All of these come from different chapters. So this week you are in chapters 5, 7, and 8. So I'm going to do my best to kind of walk you through the concepts for each of those chapters, along with connecting you to resources that go along with these chapters, and then talk to you about the assignments themselves. So in the materials folder, you can see that we have the links and slides to each of the chapters. So I have them pulled up over here. So chapter 5 is going to be about kind of the reading process. So as I mentioned in previous videos, I will go over the slides, and then I encourage you to go in and take a deeper look, especially at any of these areas that you need to pay more particular attention to. So chapter 5 talks about, the big picture here is that you need to approach reading differently than you did possibly from high school. Up to 85% of what you learn in the college setting is done through reading. That means that you are often in charge of your own reading outside of class. And so it's really important to make sure that when you're doing those readings, you understand what you're reading. You want to be able to walk away with an understanding. So the kind of rule of thumb is to expect to spend about 2 or more hours on homework for every hour you spend in class. Now sometimes you won't need that much, and sometimes you'll need more. It depends on the class itself. So you want to make sure that you're appropriating enough time for the reading process. So this chapter talks about the 4 steps of active reading: preparing to read, doing the actual reading, grabbing your key ideas, and then reviewing. So what does that mean? So when you prepare to read, it's just what it sounds like. You want to spend some time getting yourself ready. That could physically mean finding the right space to do your reading in, making sure that you have an academic environment around you, but then also doing some previewing, thinking about what you already know about the topic, what do you need to know, what are some purposes that you have for reading, going through and previewing the actual text itself, looking at the titles, subtitles, anything in bold, anything underlined, italicized, graphics, and so on, kind of like warming up to do the actual reading. Again, you want to make sure that you are connecting what you read to your class, so it's kind of setting those goals. If your assignment is given, hey, you're going to read chapter 4, and then by the end, you need to be able to answer these questions. You already have a goal that's already set. If your instructor does not give you an assignment, set one for yourself. By the end of this chapter, you would like to define 10 vocabulary terms, or you would like to summarize the meaning in your own words. So that way you have a goal, as well as a little bit more motivation to get through the reading, because you want to be active in that reading. And then, of course, you want to actually start your reading. So you want to take a look after you've done your previewing and think about how you're going to section up your reading. So if you're looking at a longer chapter, you may be looking at, every couple pages, stopping, thinking about what you've read, connecting it to what you've already read or to what you already know in the class, and have your main goal to be able to kind of stop and check in on your comprehension. You don't want to read 10 pages and realize you've been lost the entire 10 pages. You want to be able to stop every few pages and just check in with yourself. And if you don't understand what you've read, fix it then. Look up words, seek help, do what you need to do to check that. Also, you do not want to take notes, highlight, underline, or anything like that while you read. You want to read and then go back and highlight, take notes, or underline annotations. Because if you've ever highlighted while you're reading and then you take a step back and you're like, oh shoot, everything's highlighted, it's because while you read you think everything's important. However, if you can leave some kind of a pause in between sections and really go back and say, okay, now that I'm done with these 5 pages, what really was important here? You have some perspective that way. So you really want to make sure that you section up your reading that way and then go back and revisit and take those notes, take those highlights and so on. So there's some other strategies to do while you're highlighting and underlining, or whatever strategy you prefer. You also want to look for those key ideas. Think about the main ideas, the thesis statements, the key terms, things like that that are going to help you with the understanding of the text. And then something that a lot of students tend to skip over is this part, reviewing. You want to be able to think about what you've read, not just close the book and walk away, but really start thinking about it. Even if you don't have a test or a quiz, close it up, summarize it, put in your own words. The next day, revisit, connect back to what you've learned in class, make those connections. Did you answer the questions you had posed? Did you meet the goals you had set at the beginning of the reading? So all of these things are things that you should be doing while you read. So your chapter 5 will go into more depth, talking about, are you ready to transition? Some of you, if this is your first semester in college, looking at college reading a little differently. You'll have different sources, different types of reading. How do you read to learn? This goes through that reading cycle I just talked about a little bit more in detail. So the goal is, if you start implementing this, if you haven't already, you're going to see some increases in your comprehension, because the big goal when you read is you want to walk away with understanding, because what's the purpose if you don't remember what you've read or you can't apply it? So really pay attention to this reading cycle, making sure that you are kind of going through each of these steps. And if you don't currently prepare to read, or if you don't currently go back and reread or go back and take notes, then start challenging yourself to do that to see if it helps your comprehension. There's a section here that talks about different types of text, because you approach different texts differently. You're not going to read a math text the same way you're going to read a historical text. So this is going to give you tips if you're taking any particular classes this semester or coming up where you might have to do some different types of reading. This section really goes into details about some strategies on how to approach that best. A big piece of your reading is your vocabulary. The more words you understand, the better your comprehension. And so this section will talk about how can you build your vocabulary. There's lots of different ways to do that. I know one way I like to tell my students is freerice.com is a nice website. It was originally built for vocabulary, but you can see over here there are different categories now. So there's different subjects you can go in here for. I still mostly use it for the vocabulary. You can go in and you can create an account, or you can just do it as a guest, and you'll see that there are different levels. So if I looked here, Courage Means, every time I get a correct answer, I donate 10 grains of rice to the World Food Program, and I'm helping a good cause while also building vocabulary, and it gets more difficult. And so this is a kind of a neat site to go, even if you have a couple minutes in between classes, to build vocabulary, but also serve a good purpose. And again, these words get way trickier. So it's a nice way to build that vocabulary. Another site is Quizlet, and some of you might already be familiar with this, where you can create vocabulary flashcards. So this is a nice strategy to help, especially those of you who are taking maybe classes like medical terminology or any other course that has a lot of vocabulary you have to learn in a short period of time. Quizlet is a nice kind of electronic version of your flashcards. So that might be another, helpful place for you to go. And just looking at your chosen career path and what kind of language and terms are used in there, and creating like a vocabulary journal is another way to help build vocabulary. So all those are different ways to help with vocabulary, and our chapter kind of goes into more depth with this as well. This kind of hits on the vocabulary journal, look for new words, try to infer the meaning, try to come up with an educated guess, use the dictionary. So all of these will go over some vocabulary strategies, as well as like using word parts. So I encourage you to take a look at that section. Okay, that is chapter 5. So now we're going to take a look at chapter 7. Chapter 7 is just about general interacting with instructors and classes. And so you want to make sure that, again, you're kind of looking at the difference between high school and college, and how you should be also approaching your college classes and college instructors differently. And so you want to kind of be aware that your instructors are often actively involved in their field, and they're also allowing you a lot more responsibility and independence in terms of your learning process. So this chapter goes into, the importance of making sure that you go to class, which it might seem obvious you need to be there, but there's absolutely a correlation between the fewer absences you have and the higher your grade, and vice versa. You want to make sure that you are making your presence known, because even if you are in a large class, your instructor will know when you're missing. You will want to make sure that you're not missing, necessary material, especially if you're going to be assessed on it later. And if you think in money purposes, you're paying for the classes, so you want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth. So if you have to miss class, general things that you want to make sure that you're doing, send an email, check in with the student, check your syllabus, all of these things that make sure that you're still being active with the class, even if you can't be there, and a justified reason for not being there. Participating in class, participation is going to look different for every student. So sometimes it's going to be your body language, sometimes it's going to be asking and answering questions, other times it's going to be your eye contact, or maybe asking questions after class, sending emails, taking notes. So all of those are different ways that you can participate, and you want to make sure that your instructor and they can gauge too if you're engaged or if you're not. So this goes over these different ways, because participation does not always mean you're always talking, always asking questions. There are different ways to make sure that you are participating and engaged in the class. So when you do want to ask questions, you want to make sure again that you are asking a question anytime you feel like you have one. Don't feel like you need to hold back, because odds are if you have the question, someone else does. And this is also going to play a role in, are you preparing for class? If you look at your material ahead of time, read through, you can kind of get your questions prepared for while you're in the classroom, as well as maybe answer some of your own questions. And so you want to make sure that you are kind of doing that legwork ahead of time, which can help the participation and asking questions process. Some other things this chapter goes over is just communicating with your instructor. So making sure that you're sending, professional emails, visiting office hours, talking to a professor before or after class if you can, and just using those professional communication skills. Some other things that Chapter 7 goes into detail about is talking about particularly like presentation anxiety. So some of you may have to make some presentations in your effective speaking classes, in your business communication classes, whatever it might be. And so we know that anxiety exists, and some anxiety is positive. It helps you and pushes you to do your best. Others becomes a little overwhelming. So some things that you can do is make sure that you practice and prepare. That's the best way to combat anxiety. Research it, plan it out, use different resources. So really making sure that you're doing your part to get prepared. So Chapter 7 is going to go, again, into more detail. So I encourage you to take a look inside if there was something in particular that we just kind of glazed over and you're like, yeah, you know what? I need to know more about this. And as always, there's those self-assessments at the very beginning of the chapter to kind of help see where you are and where you want to go. And I have a feeling that a lot of you may pay particular attention to that presentation anxiety, especially if you have not had to do any presentations yet and you're kind of thinking about how is this going to look, what is it going to be encompassing, how can I overcome that anxiety that I feel. All right, so again, please spend some time, pay attention on these sections that you feel like you really need to kind of dig into a little deeper. And then Chapter 8 is on writing for classes. And so there's not a slideshow for this one, but I'm going to show you a resource here in just a few minutes. So writing, very similar to reading. Reading and writing are very closely related. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at writing, the different purposes you have for writing, different ways to approach it, and how important it is in your overall learning process. If you think about just as much reading that you're doing a great chunk of writing as well, whether it's note-taking, whether it's papers. And so this section goes through the differences between high school and college writing. Again, for those of you who are brand new to college, or any of you who are a CCP student, what kind of papers are commonly assigned. And so this goes through kind of some classifications of different verbs and things that you might be asked to do inside your papers, to synthesize, to compare, contrast. And so you want to make sure that you know what those prompts entail, as well as paying attention to the scope of your different assignments that you'll have to work on. So how do you become a better writer? So we're going to talk about different resources here. So if I go over to my Stark State homepage, I can go under Info for current students. And we have our Writing Center here, and there's a couple different places we can access this. So this is going to give you some very general information, where they're located and the hours they are there. We do have an online Writing Center, so you're always welcome to log in, create an account, and access the online Writing Center and create your appointments there. Or you can go to the physical campus here on Main or Stark State Akron. Or if you didn't, you don't want to make an appointment, but you just want some resources. We have a lot of great resources, and it's kind of embedded right here in this digital library. So you can go through and really find out more about what the Writing Center does, different resources. Again, if you're not necessarily looking for a visit quite yet, but you want some assistance. And then when you're ready, you can always make your appointment. And there's that information again on how to do that, registering and making appointments. So all of this is here for you. You've already paid for the Writing Center. Please utilize it. It's part of your tuition. Yeah, so making sure that you really pay attention to the resources available, knowing what your assignments are asking so that you really are doing the right thing by your assignment and for your instructor. And talking about the writing process. A lot of people are very familiar with the writing process already. Prepare, brainstorming, writing, revising, editing. And so this goes into more detail about the writing process and different ways that you can improve upon that process. Different types of writing in college classes, so being aware that you will have in-class essays. You're also going to have, in some cases, some group writing projects, whether that's like a speech or a paper. There are classes here on campus where you have to do these projects with others. And then you have online writing classes as well. So this will go about those different types of writing. I also want to point out that in conjunction with the Writing Center, we have our digital library. So if you are struggling with citations or the research part of the writing process, the digital library is a great place to go as well. So I wanted to point both of those out. You'll actually have lessons on the digital library coming up in the next couple weeks, so we'll see that more in depth. But I really want to make sure that you know about the Writing Center and take advantage of this. We also have, if anyone in this class or you know anyone where English is not their first language, you can also use the ELL lab. Okay, so again, I really encourage you, please spend some time in each of these chapters, chapters 5, 7, and 8, really looking at the sections that you think you can benefit most from. I teach the developmental reading classes here on campus, and so we do have, thinking back to chapter 5, classes specifically designed for enhancing reading. And so if you feel like, you know what, you could benefit from one of those classes, let me know. I can talk to you about those classes, what else they entail. Utilize, again, the Writing Center, the digital library. Look at sources like Quizlet and FreeRice, all of those things to help with your different components. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and talk about your assignments for this week. So week 4, I'm going to go ahead and go down to assignments. You see, here's your discussion forum. This is due by Wednesday for week 4 attendance, responded to students by Sunday. So you can see that here there are 4 topics, and you've seen something like this before. You have to do all 4 of them. So you're not just picking a couple, you're going to respond to all 4. So this is all about chapter 8, the writing process. So look at the 4 different areas of writing: past writing, mechanics, writing process, seeking help. You have 2 statements in each category. You are just filling out each statement in each category. So make sure that you are completing those. And there's the example of the post down here. Okay, so once you submit your original response, make sure that you go back and respond to 2 students. If you're not sure about all of these, that's when you go back into the chapter 8, PowerPoint, the chapter 8 link to the textbook, go to the Writing Center and kind of look to see how could you overcome some of these bad habits, or how could you learn to correct these errors. So that's your chapter 8 discussion forum. I'm going to scroll down here, your chapter 5 assignment. You're going to click here and it's going to open up into a Microsoft Word document. Chapter 5 was about the college reading. And so this will look familiar as well because you've just had something like this similarly in previous weeks. So you'll have 3 different areas of the reading process: reading comprehension, reading speed, and vocabulary. And what you're going to do is think about, what are 2 things I need to improve with my comprehension, 2 things I need to improve with my speed, and 2 things to improve with my vocabulary. You're going to write down those 2 things. When are you going to take the action? Your next class period, next semester. How will you know? How will you know your comprehension is improved? How will you know your speed is improved? How will you know your vocabulary is improved? Okay, so make sure you save that document, go back in, browse, submit it right there. So that's your chapter 5, relating to the reading chapter. That is due by Sunday. And then your last thing, this is kind of connected to chapter 7 concepts, is specifically honing in on online learning. So it's a two-parter. You're first going to take this survey. See, it's hyperlinked in blue right there. Take this survey. It's going to open up into a survey. Here it is. You're going to go through, as soon as it loads. There we go. You're going to go through and you're going to take this survey. It's all about online learning. You'll submit it. You'll get some results. I will not get to see your results. What you are going to do is, knowing your results, go ahead and click in. You can just do it right here under Write Submission. It wants to know, after you take the survey, submit your score and comment whether you believe online learning is right for you and why. So something just like that. On the survey, I scored A, whatever your score is, and then you agree with it or you disagree, and why. Okay, so I will not get to see the survey. You are reporting back your results to me and tell me why you agree or disagree with this survey. So that's the online learning right for you survey assignment. Okay, so again, to recap, you are looking through chapters 5, 7, and 8 this week. You are submitting your Chapter 8 original response in the Chapter 8 discussion forum by Wednesday for week 4 attendance, responded to students by Sunday. Complete the Chapter 5 assignment, the Word document on the different areas of the reading process. And online learning right for you, take the survey and then tell me about your results and if you agree with them or why not. Okay, so that is your week 4. Don't forget about your workshop assignment coming up. Please let me know if you have any questions and hope you all have a great week. Bye.